Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 71, Letting the Empathy In. So as you know, all month we've been taking a deeper dive into what empathy means, what it doesn't mean, how to express it, and what are some of the obstacles to all of that. And I want to finish up the month today by talking about the concept of actually receiving empathy from others. Whether we're getting that from a counselor, from a mentor, a pastor, a coach, a best friend, a relative, or a colleague. Because empathy is wonderful, right? So it sounds fabulous and easy. However, not for many people. In fact, it can actually feel really uncomfortable and sometimes a bit scary, and there are good reasons for that. Let's dive in and explore a little bit about this, shall we? So as you listen today, I want you to kind of think about where you are on that continuum, where you may struggle, where it's not a problem for you, and or people that you love, people that you know. When you are providing empathy for them, I want you just to really be observant and witness what you see in them as well. Like, how well are they receiving the empathy and understanding from you? Okay, so what are some of the ways that you know that you have difficulty letting the good stuff in? And the good stuff, as a reminder, is someone showing understanding. Like, no wonder you're angry or sad, or that must have been really difficult or incredible and fabulous, right? It's not always when we're hurting. We really also need the validation when things are great. So that's what I mean by empathy. Empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy is about us. Empathy is about them. Remember? Sympathy is, I feel so bad for you that happened. Empathy is, I put myself aside and try to walk around in your shoes for a moment, imagining what that must be like, because perhaps I've walked through something similar. Or I can take a really good educated guess. Why might it be hard to let something so wonderful in? I mean, to feel heard and understood and validated. Well, it's really vulnerable. Like we've talked about in the previous episodes, it's vulnerable to express empathy, to put yourself out there and screw it up and be wrong, right? It's very vulnerable, if not 1,000 times more vulnerable, to receive it, as great as it is and as much as we need it. Because here's the thing, it exposes you in that moment. And maybe you're not ready to expose pieces of yourself that you feel are hidden for a reason, locked away, not accessed, because they're way too vulnerable. For a lot of people, their history includes being in the spotlight in the past where it had a negative connotation. We've touched on that early on in the podcast, where maybe you were shamed, you were ridiculed at the dinner table, you were ignored, you were bullied, whatever, fill in the blank. It wasn't good when the spotlight was shown upon you in the moment. And guys, especially if there are other people present, like that global shaming we talk about, not good. This really, though, comes down to the caregivers or the adults in the room, right? So during childhood, when a caregiver can't hear with empathy that they've hurt their child's feelings, maybe you experience that. What happens is it sets up this internal conflict, this fight within ourselves with really long-lasting consequences. Because then you have to choose, right, between a sense of safe connection with your parent, by not sharing your feelings because your parent can't handle it. They can't provide detachment, empathy. They get upset, they react, they shut down. Now they're upset. Now you have to stop and take care of their feelings, right? So you have to choose between being yourself, being authentic, and just sharing your feelings as a kid and being able to lean upon a strong adult. So the choice between that which you really want to do or keeping that connection. Guess what most people end up choosing? Shutting down, stuffing away their feelings in order to survive, in order to be what the parent needs. What the parent needs. So as you can see, some of this disowning means we disown our vulnerability. That's what we're always disowning, guys. You know, what I really think, what I really feel, what I deep down really need, what I'm terrified of. Yeah. So there's the big one. You know, the fear of that it's going to expose too much of you and maybe that's going to end badly. The other way is maybe you're afraid to actually trust the authenticity of it. Like, will you be manipulated? Check out previous episodes we've done on manipulation if you need to or need a refresher. But here's a big one. It's like having been open and trusting maybe in the past with someone who betrayed you. And we can be betrayed in a million different ways, guys. It doesn't only mean when someone steps out of the relationship. It just means that you trusted them with your heart and soul and they blew it. They can blow that physically by stepping out. They can blow it emotionally by abusing you, abandoning you, being irresponsible, having addictions, things like that. The other piece I want to touch on that many of you are probably familiar with is the love bombing. Now, this is usually in romantic relationships, but it can also happen in friendships where in the beginning they're so attentive and so loving and so into you and into your business and just there to hold your hand and, oh my gosh, that's amazing, or how horrible for you. I mean, they're there and it feels like they're really in tune to you. But what happens is oftentimes when it's too good to be true, you're right, it's too good to be true. Because these are the folks that end up being controlling and shaming later. They are grooming you. They're grooming you to let your guard down and let them in and trust them. And then later you realize that was not a good idea to let someone in that deep. The other way is maybe a partner or a friend shared information or secrets that they promised they would never tell anyone. And you found out that you were betrayed. So then your information may not be safe in this relationship is your fear. Another obstacle could be that you're not sure how to connect vulnerably back with them. You know, maybe it's just the fear of connecting vulnerably with the person in front of you who is extending empathy to you. You know, that's a real bonding experience. I mean, they're hearing your deepest, darkest, and they're validating that. You're joining with them in that moment. And maybe that's scary. What if it's ripped away? What if it's gone? What if they get up and walk away and here you opened up your heart, right? So there's that. Another barrier could be, and this could be conscious or unconscious, is the wow, I haven't had this in so long, if ever. Like, whoa, it's a kick in the gut almost. It may shed light on even your current relationships, and maybe you're just not ready to go there right now. I run into this an awful lot with clients. Even if they're ready to admit out loud, like, wow, he never gives me this, or she never provides understanding, they may not be ready to pull the trigger on doing anything about it in that relationship, like setting a boundary, asking for what they need. I think it's because they deep down know damn well that if this person can't provide empathy, there's a whole lot of unhealthy stuff going on there. A lot of control issues, usually a lot of emotional immaturity and lack of boundaries. So deep down they know, like, oh, that's not going to go well. And they're just not ready to blow that up yet. They don't have someone else to grab onto yet, somewhere else to belong. They're not feeling strong enough, so on and so forth. What they experienced instead was maybe a lot of denial. So what are some of the ways that we don't get empathy in previous relationships that can really play into a few of these? And that is a lot of denial is the big one. Denial of your reality. You've heard me say they take your reality, twist it, and hand it back to you and make you think you're the crazy one. Because maybe you just expressed something that upset you, that pissed you off, that scared you, something that you need. Maybe you set a boundary and they say, come on, it's not that bad. You're just being way too sensitive. You can't take anything. You can't take a joke is another big one. When that joke that they just said in a snarky way had a lot of truth in it, and you knew that, the everything will be fine. Let me fix your feelings. Now, sometimes people can do this because you're making them feel uncomfortable because they can't fix it and make it go away. Now, that's about them. And I think we've all been guilty a moment or two in our life where we're like, oh, it's okay, don't cry. Here's some tissues. Invalidating your experience with another. Oh, they didn't mean it. Oh, come on. How would they ever set out to hurt you? Again, making you feel crazy for what you feel. All right, pull that chin up, wipe those tears, let's get moving. So really don't sit in your feelings. Maybe it was worse. Maybe they shamed you. Come on, get yourself together. You're being ridiculous. This is crazy. I don't have time for this. What the hell is wrong with you anyway? Awful, isn't it? But people hear that every day, guys. I hope you're not hearing that in your relationships. That's toxic, and it needs to stop. And, well-meaning folks can try to put a positive spin on it too soon. Like, as soon as we share what's going on, they're like, oh, but maybe this was meant to be. Look on the bright side. Look at the silver linings. Here's the thing. Yes, we want that. We need that, but not before you validate that I'm not crazy for feeling what I'm feeling and thinking what I'm thinking and needing what I'm needing. Then, yes, I want to know that life's going to be okay. To wrap it up, yes, I need hope and I need reassurance. But not when you try to spoon feed it to me first to shut me up. So those are some of the typical obstacles. There are more. I just want you to think about, do you struggle with any of these? And hopefully we just talked about maybe why, right? It's not your fault. And really just thinking about that for a moment. So what are some of the ways that we block empathy in the moment with someone? Well, one of the big ways we can do that is we can minimize. We can say, oh, this happened today, and they say, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. And you're like, oh, it's no big deal. It wasn't a really big deal at all. It's in the past. That was 10 years ago. I'm over it. Shit happened. Oh, I'm sure others have it worse, right? The guilt comes up immediately and you make it relative too quickly and say, well, I'm sure other people have it worse. Of course they may have it worse and others may have it better. That's not the point. Point is, this is your experience right now and it matters to you. Or it's okay, I'm fine. Another thing you can do is divert and distract out of anxiety right away, where you can say, oh, okay, well, yeah, thank you. So how have you been? Like, how are the kids? Sometimes clients will quickly look at me and say, oh my gosh, I bet you hear so much awful stuff and here I'm adding to it. How can you stand that? And they switch the focus back to me to get it off of them because they're feeling very uncomfortable just receiving my empathy. And finally, we may shut down. We may get quiet. We may even panic. It's normal to have some anxiety come up if you're not used to receiving this kind of connection from someone, this kind of validation. It feels too foreign. You're not sure whether to trust it. So you can shut down. You can get panicky. You can say, oh, gotta go. Good seeing you. To run and get the hell out of there, right? So those are some of the ways that we can block the empathy in the moment, as opposed to being able to receive it. So how do we work on allowing ourselves to receive empathy and understanding and compassion in the moment? The first thing we have to do is only share with safe people. Only share with safe people. Your gut should not be twisting. You shouldn't have that funny feeling like you can't trust someone. You want to look at, what have they shown you? Like, look at the source. Are they healthy enough Do they have good boundaries? That is the biggest thing and the first thing we have to look for. And how do I know that? Do they talk about that? I want to hear someone talk about boundaries. When they're sharing a situation with me, I want them to be able to label the boundaries, their own and those of others. Someone who is comfy in their own skin with confidence and has good boundaries, you're going to feel emotionally safer around. You may not recognize that that's probably a big part of why, but that is true. They don't talk smack about other people. They're not judgy. They're not focused on other people. They're focused on themselves. They take good responsibility. They're emotionally agile. They are perceptive and sensitive. They have a full range of affect. You see them expressing anger to joy and everything in between. They're calmer. They're more grounded. They're not in crisis all the time. They are emotionally mature. They don't lash out. They don't act out. They can sit there and tell you how they're feeling and why. So those are some typical ones. And they're not going to BS you or manipulate you. That's the other thing. You got to think about this person. I mean, is this someone that wants to date you or someone who wants a job from you or whatever? Yeah, don't do that with them. Save your vulnerability for people who have no motivation other than to be a person for you in your life. Okay? Then I want you to acknowledge without judgment, that you might feel uncomfortable with a safe person sharing something that's vulnerable. And just affirm for yourself why that makes sense. Just tell yourself, wow, I don't have a lot of this in my life. I'm not used to this. I don't know what the hell to do with it. Okay, so I'm feeling uncomfortable. And I need to do this anyway. I've got to get this off my chest. I need to share this. I need to work through this. I need to connect and belong to others. All right, so you acknowledge your discomfort and you choose that something is more important than your fear. The next big thing I want you to focus on is the grief work. Yes, the grief work around empathy. Sounds crazy on the face of it, but hear me out. What about all the times you didn't receive empathy in the past, from childhood to now, like we talked about? If you feel like you have grief work to do around this, do it. It is so, so important. I want you to let yourself be sad about that for a bit. And maybe even pissed off if I were you. You deserved that. Everyone deserves that, especially kids, right? Eventually, after you've done a lot of that, you will see that it was never about you. Your feelings and thoughts and needs were always valid because they were true and they were true for you. Those folks just couldn't, like we've talked about many times on this podcast. They didn't have it within them, mostly because it was never done for them or expressed to them or given to them. And they have so much self-loathing and hurting on the inside. They just didn't have the bandwidth for you. But do you see how I just separated it out? Just because they doesn't mean you. Just because they could not provide that for you doesn't mean it wasn't valid and you didn't deserve it and need it. Then I want you to just practice allowing it to be. And slowly, slowly letting it in. In the moment, let the tears come up. And the emotion well up in your throat, and your throat feels tight because it's there. If it's in your throat, it's time. That's all you need to know. It's there. It's time. You've been holding on to it for way too long because you're finally being heard and seen and understood. That you have a right to feel what you feel. It is your truth. No one has a right to tell you that that's not true for you. Then I want you to practice affirming back. Yes, that's true. Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that. Thank them for getting it. Thank them for listening, for taking time to really get you and get it. And if you have the courage and if it's time, go deeper. That's the magic of empathy. It helps us peel back the protective layers to reveal more and more about that subject, about our true self, the beautiful, raw, and vulnerable self. Yes, it may be terrifying and cleansing and life-changing. So all that is practice. And you may have to walk away and text them later and say, I just want to thank you for listening to me yesterday. That was amazing. You may not have the courage to do it in the moment. No, when we practice, we get better and better and better. When we practice, we desensitize ourselves to the anxiety of doing something raw and real and different. When we practice, we show ourselves that this is okay and it's actually better and it feels fabulous even when it's scary, and we normalize it for ourselves. Over time, it becomes your new normal. Over time, you're going to desire deeper connections. You're going to demand empathy in your relationships. You're not going to want plastic connection. You're not going to be able to handle it. It's not going to be enough. Yes, you can do small talk here and there, but you're going to want and need something more substantive because you've now experienced it. And the more you experience it, the more you're going to want it because it just feels more authentic and more real because it is. As a therapist and coach, I started out working with teenagers who got in trouble, struggling in school, probation before judgment. So, of course, parents would drag them in for me to fix them. What would happen oftentimes is the kid was just the fever of the virus. His acting out was the fever. The virus was the family, mom or dad, lack of parental love and boundaries and empathy and understanding. They just couldn't give it to my client. So unfortunately, what would happen often is the client would sit with me week after week and be heard and understood and validated and challenged, right? But they would go home and see the contrast and say, wait, what? And they would get angry and act out at home, and the parent would call me pissed off and pull them out of therapy. Yeah. And when I sit with adult clients, it's no different. They start looking around at their other relationships and start comparing and saying, I need better. Because they're experiencing me listening and honoring and validating. That circles back to the very beginning. One of the blocks that I said we can have is that can be terrifying. And that may make you push the empathy away when you finally receive it. Because you're like, oh, shit. Now I got to look at everything, and I'm not ready to, but that's okay. Everything happens right as it should, slowly but surely. What's more important is recognizing the benefits of you receiving empathy. I think it is one of the only pathways to true healing, to be heard, validated, and understood with compassion, so that hurt can come out into the light and be dealt with. And you've heard me say, if you don't do it this way, you're going to leak it out. You're going to act it out. Everyone in your life is going to pay. You're going to internalize it. You're going to hurt yourself. Your health is going to take a toll. I also think this is one of the best ways to build self-trust and self-confidence because you're getting other people mirroring back your reality. And that is so powerful. It's powerful for our healing and our self-confidence. And I also think it's really powerful because it helps us own our stuff. So if someone mirrors back, Mary, that's a really awful relationship. You're really feeling like you're not being treated well. Well, if I hear that mirror back to me, guess what eventually I need to do? I need to look at that and say, I'm not in a healthy relationship and I need to take responsibility for it. So empathy isn't just to help us heal, but I think it's also there to help us change and grow. And it's the most powerful way to get that because you do it when you're ready. Like you may hear that and say, oh God, but I'm not ready to look at that next. And you file it away for later. Until you know what happens, right? The next week, someone else says the same thing. You're like, oh God. Then 3 times, got to pay attention. Someone else mentions, wow, that's really crappy. I also think, finally, that you will absorb this love and compassion and internalize it, loving yourself more, shutting up that critical parent you've internalized years ago, and then turning to others and loving them better. So today we talked about just how important it is to be able to receive empathy and understanding. Number one, for your own sanity, your healing, your self-trust, and your personal growth. We explored some common reasons why we tend to block it. Maybe we minimize it or we emotionally run from it. My hope is that you can take away some ways to work on receiving it more and receiving it better, and maybe extending this wonderful way to connect with others in your life even more, because we all need it, especially right now. Thank you for joining me today. May you stay sane, healthy, grounded, and loved. Hold on to hope and be the hope for others. Be sure to check out the show notes at www.ownitpowercast.com to sign up for the weekly newsletter that comes out every Tuesday. There you can listen to the podcast episode, read the blog, get the news, and any bonus downloads that are offered during the episodes, you can access them there, and ones that are offered for previous episodes. Also, I'm putting together some Q&A episodes and would love to hear your questions. There is a link there in the show notes, or you can hit me up at Soar with Mary on Instagram or on Twitter or Facebook. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you could begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.